Far out in the Pacific Ocean lies one of the most isolated inhabited islands on Earth. A place known for its towering stone faces, ancient mysteries, and unanswered questions. Most people know it as Easter Island, but to its people, it is Rapa Nui. Visitors often arrive wondering about the moai, the massive stone figures standing watch over the island. How were they carved? How were they moved? What purpose did they serve? Yet hidden behind those famous monuments is another layer of belief. One far less known, one far more unsettling. The belief that the island was never truly inhabited by the living alone. Because long before tourists arrived, long before archaeologists began studying the island, the people of Rapa Nui spoke of spirits, the Aku Aku, humanoid beings connected to the dead, invisible presences that watched over specific locations, spirits who could help with household chores, protect sacred places, or become violent and dangerous. Some were respected, some were feared, and some had to be hunted down and destroyed. Tonight, Witches and Wanderers, we travel to one of the most isolated places on Earth to explore the strange and fascinating spirits known as the Aku Aku, the unseen inhabitants of Rapa Nui. Hello, and welcome back, Witches and Wanderers, to the Morbid Witch Podcast, where we explore myths, legends, folklore, cryptids, deities, spirits, and the darker corners of human storytelling. I'm your host, Kari Murders. Tonight, we're traveling thousands of miles into the Pacific Ocean to explore the mythology of Rapa Nui, also known as Easter Island. While the island is famous for its incredible stone monuments, its spiritual traditions are equally fascinating and often overlooked. Our subject tonight is the Aku Aku. These spirits occupied a unique place within traditional Rapa Nui beliefs. They weren't exactly gods, they weren't exactly ghosts, and they weren't worshipped in the way many supernatural beings are. Instead, they existed alongside the living, sometimes helping, sometimes harming, always watching. To all my witches and wanderers joining me tonight, thank you for spending part of your day with me. Whether you're listening beneath moonlight, working late, or relaxing after a long day, I'm grateful you're here. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment, sharing your favorite island, mythology, or ghost story. And if you're listening on Spotify, please consider leaving a rating for the show. You can find the Morbid Witch Podcast on Spotify, YouTube, iHeartRadio, and Pandora. Now, let's step onto the shores of Rapa Nui. To understand the Aku Aku, we first need to understand the island they called home. Rapa Nui is one of the most remote inhabited islands on the planet. Located in the southeastern Pacific Ocean, it sits thousands of miles from major continental land masses. For the people who lived there, the ocean was not simply a source for food or transportation. It was the edge of their world. Isolation often shapes mythology in fascinating ways. Communities develop unique traditions, stories, and spiritual beliefs that evolve independently over generations. Rapa Nui was no exception. The island's people created a rich spiritual system that connected the living, the dead, the natural landscape, and their ancestors. In many cultures, the dead depart entirely from the world of the living. The Aku Aku occupied a different role. They remained present, not fully alive, not fully gone. Instead, they existed as invisible neighbors sharing the island with humanity. The landscape itself was alive with spiritual significance. Cliffs, caves, volcanic craters, sacred sites. Each location could possess its own supernatural inhabitants, and among these inhabitants, none were more important than the Aku Aku. Depictions of the Aku Aku vary throughout different traditions, but they were generally understood as humanoid spirits connected to the dead. Unlike many ghost traditions, however, the Aku Aku were not necessarily eternal. One of the most fascinating aspects of Rapa Nui belief is that these spirits could be destroyed. This immediately distinguishes them from the immortal souls found in many other spiritual systems. The Aku Aku occupied a middle ground, powerful, supernatural, yet vulnerable. They could influence the world around them, but they were not invincible. Some Aku Aku were male, others were female. Many became associated with specific locations throughout the island. A particular cave might belong to one spirit, a valley to another, a shoreline to yet another. This connection between spirits and place reinforced the idea that the landscape itself possessed personality and memory. Every location carried a story, every story carried a spirit, and every spirit demanded respect. Some Aku Aku were even elevated to a status resembling deification. Yet despite this reverence, they were not worshipped in the traditional sense. Instead, people acknowledged them, respected them, and attempted to maintain positive relationships with them, because an unhappy Aku Aku could become a serious problem. According to tradition, the Aku Aku arrived on Rapa Nui alongside Hotu Matua, the legendary first settler and founding ancestor of the island. Hotu Matua occupies a central role in many Rapa Nui origin stories. He is often described as the leader who guided the first settlers across the ocean to establish a new homeland. But he did not arrive alone. The Aku Aku came with him. This detail is deeply significant. Many cultures imagine spirits emerging after humans settle a place. The Aku Aku were present from the beginning. They arrived as part of the founding population itself. Tradition holds that roughly 90 Aku Aku accompanied the settlers. 90 invisible beings sharing the island with the living. 90 spirits helping shape the destiny of Rapa Nui. Yet these early Aku Aku possessed a darker side. They were said to be cannibalistic. This aspect of the myth immediately introduces tension into their character. The spirits were not purely benevolent, nor were they purely evil. They occupied a morally complex space that reflected many forces of nature itself. Helpful one moment, dangerous the next, much like the sea surrounding the island. The relationship between humans and Aku Aku would therefore require caution, respect, and occasionally confrontation. Not everyone could communicate with the Aku Aku. That responsibility fell to special individuals known as koromake or iwa atua. These people served as intermediaries between the living and the spiritual world. Their roles share similarities with shamans, spirit mediums, and ritual specialists found in many cultures throughout the world. The koromake possessed knowledge that ordinary people lacked. They understood the customs of the spirits. They knew how to interpret signs and messages. And perhaps most importantly, they knew how to deal with dangerous Aku Aku. While friendly spirits could coexist peacefully with humans, violent Aku Aku sometimes caused problems. When this happened, the koromake were called upon to intervene. According to tradition, they could dispose of troublesome spirits. Think about how unusual that concept is. In many ghost stories, humans fear spirits because they cannot fight back. Here, trained specialists possess methods for removing spiritual threats. The relationship between humans and spirits were not entirely one-sided. Knowledge provided power, and those who understood the spirit world could protect their communities from its dangers. The Koramaki served as guardians standing between two worlds, the visible and the invisible, the living and the dead. When most people hear the word spirit, they immediately imagine something frightening. A ghost haunting an abandoned building, a malevolent entity lurking in the darkness, an unseen force waiting to cause harm. But the aku-aku were not always terrifying. In fact, many of them were considered helpful companions to the living. This is one of the most fascinating aspects of Rapa Nui spirituality. The relationship between humans and spirits was not based entirely on fear. Instead, it resembled a kind of partnership. If treated respectfully, certain aku-aku could become protectors and helpers. Islanders believed that a well-fed aku-aku was generally a happy aku-aku. Although they were not worshipped as gods, they were acknowledged before meals. The simple act of recognition served as a gesture of respect. It reminded both the living and the spirits that they shared the same space. To modern listeners, this might seem unusual, yet similar traditions exist throughout the world. Many cultures leave offerings for ancestors. Others set aside food for household spirits. Some even reserve a place at the table for the dead. The underlying idea remains the same. Respect strengthens relationships, even relationships with beings that cannot be seen. According to tradition, friendly aku-aku could assist families with daily tasks. Imagine waking up to discover work completed that no one remembers doing, a task somehow finished overnight, an object mysteriously returned to its proper place, a problem unexpectedly solved. Stories described helpful aku-aku assisting with household responsibilities and protecting families from misfortune. Whether taken literally or symbolically, these tales reveal something important about the islanders' worldview. The dead were not necessarily separated from the living. Instead, they remained active participants within the community, still watching, still helping, still present. Before we continue our journey through the supernatural traditions of Rapa Nui, I'd like to take a moment to thank you all for listening. To every witch and wanderer joining me tonight, thank you for your support. Whether you've been listening since episode 1 or you've only recently discovered the podcast, I'm grateful you're here. If you're enjoying tonight's episode, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. Your comments help build this incredible community and help me discover future episode topics. And if you're listening on Spotify, please consider leaving a rating for the show. You can also find the Morbid Witch Podcast on Spotify, YouTube, iHeartRadio, and Pandora. Every listen, share, and recommendation helps more witches and wanderers find their way here. Thank you for being part of this strange and spooky journey. Now, let's venture into the caves of Rapa Nui. Few places inspired more caution than the caves of Easter Island. Scattered throughout the volcanic landscape, these caves served many purposes over the centuries. Some provided shelter, others held religious significance. Some were used during times of conflict or hardship, and many were believed to be inhabited by aku-aku. To enter a cave carelessly was considered extremely foolish, not because of physical dangers alone, but because of the spirits watching from within. Traditional rituals were often performed before entering certain caves. These ceremonies acknowledged the presence of the aku-aku and sought permission to enter their domain. The exact practices varied depending on the location and the traditions being followed, but the purpose remained consistent. Show respect, avoid offense, leave peacefully. Such rituals demonstrate a common feature found throughout human cultures. Sacred spaces require proper behavior. Whether entering a temple, a church, a burial ground, or a cave, respect creates harmony. Disrespect invites consequences. Stories circulated of travelers who ignored these customs, people who entered sacred places arrogantly, people who mocked local beliefs, people who acted recklessly. Misfortune often followed. Perhaps they became lost. Perhaps accidents occurred. Perhaps illness struck unexpectedly. Whatever the outcome, the lesson remained clear. The aku-aku demanded respect. Not worship, not fear, respect. And those who failed to provide it often regretted their choices. The mythology of the aku-aku offers us something surprisingly rare. A spiritual tradition that refuses to place strict boundaries between the living and the dead. In many belief systems, death represents a permanent separation. The dead depart, the living remain, the relationship ends. Rapa Nui traditions paint a different picture. The dead continue participating in the world, not as distant ancestors existing beyond reach, but as neighbors sharing the same landscape. This worldview transformed everyday life. Every meal could involve acknowledging unseen guests. Every journey into a cave required consideration of invisible inhabitants. Every family might benefit from the assistance of ancestral spirits. The supernatural was not confined to special occasions. It existed alongside ordinary life. That idea can feel both comforting and unsettling. Comforting because it suggests loved ones never truly leave. Unsettling because it means one is never truly alone. The aku-aku occupied this space between comfort and fear. Some protected, some guided, some helped, others harmed. They reflected the complexity of humanity itself. No group of people is entirely good or entirely bad. Why should spirits be any different? Perhaps that's one reason the aku-aku remain such fascinating figures within mythology. They feel remarkably human. They possess desires, personalities, preferences, relationships, and flaws. They are not abstract concepts. They are individuals, invisible members of a larger community. Even today, the mythology of Easter Island continues to captivate people around the world. The moai may attract visitors, but stories like those of the aku-aku reveal something equally valuable: the beliefs of the people who called the island home, their understanding of life, death, memory, and coexistence. The aku-aku reminds us that mythology isn't simply about monsters or miracles. It's about how people would make sense of their world. And on one isolated island in the Pacific, that world included spirits walking beside the living. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Morbid Witch Podcast. Tonight we explored the fascinating world of the aku-aku, the spirits of Rapa Nui who occupied the space between ancestor, ghost, guardian, and supernatural neighbor. Their stories reveal a culture that viewed the boundary between life and death very differently than many of us do today. They remind us that respect, memory, and community extend beyond what we can see. To all my witches and wanderers, thank you for your continued support. Thank you for every listen, every comment, every rating, and every shared episode. You help keep these stories alive. If you enjoyed tonight's episode, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. And if you're listening on Spotify, don't forget to leave a rating for this show. You can also find the Morbid Witch Podcast on Spotify, YouTube, iHeartRadio, and Pandora. Until next time, stay strange, stay spooky, and remember, the shadows are always watching.